Welcome to Living the Reclaim Life podcast. I'm Denisha. We're glad you're here for conversations that revive hope, inspire healing, and encourage you to live a vibrant life with Christ. So grab a cup of coffee as we chat with today's guest. Welcome to today's episode. I am looking forward to having you meet my friend Robin Sertell. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, Robin did a couple of episodes with me on the Father's love and the Father's heart for us. And it was beautiful. So if you missed those, feel free to go back and check those out. Robin is an ordained pastor. She is an author and international speaker. She's the education coordinator for the Abortion Survivors Network. She's a woman of many hats. She's the founder of Robin Sertell Ministries and the director of Empowered You School of Ministry. So welcome back, Robin.
Thanks so much for having me, Denisha. Love being on this podcast with you.
Oh, we love having you. So Robin and I met through the Abortion Survivors Network. We're both a part of that organization that serves survivors and their families. And as we met through that, we kind of became instant friends. And just today, we were talking and we realized that we have the same middle name. So my middle name is Dawn, Denisha Dawn. And now everybody's going to say, Denisha Dawn. That is exactly what happened when I was young. It was Denisha Dawn. I knew I was in trouble. But my middle name is Dawn and your middle name is Dawn. Many of us have stories about how we got our names. My mom always told me that mine symbolized the dawn of a new day. And I didn't realize until later on in my life just how significant that was at the time my mom named me for her and her life. And Robin, you were named under some unique circumstances. And I want to let our listeners know that this may be a sensitive topic, as Robin was born alive during a procedure that was meant to end her life. She has a name. She has a story, and we have the privilege of learning her story today. So, Robin, will you share that with us?
Thanks so much, Denisha. It's actually kind of a fun story. As you shared, we're both part of the Abortion Survivors Network, and I am an abortion survivor. So my name really was not something that was picked out ahead of time. There were no baby spoons made with my initials on it or anything like that. And they didn't plan to have any name for me. I wasn't expected to be alive. During the pregnancy with me, my mother tried 3 times to abort me using a saline infusion abortion. What that means is, in a saline infusion abortion, a woman goes to a clinic, the abortionist will put a deep tissue needle through into the amniotic fluid, draw off some of the amniotic fluid, which is so life-giving to the baby, and replace it with this poisonous solution. It's toxic, it's very salty, and it's designed to burn the baby inside and out. As the baby is inside that fluid, they not only have that fluid burn their skin, but of course the baby gulps it down, it goes into the nose, all the areas. And so normally that baby is just burned from the inside out and the outside in. When my mother tried that the first time, she was made aware that she was supposed to go back and give birth within about 3 days, and that never happened. And they found signs of life. So they tried the same procedure, not once, not twice, but 3 times. After the 3rd time, she never went back to see if there were signs of life. She just expected to deliver a stillborn child. When she went into labor, my mom and dad were married. They went together to Methodist Hospital in Philadelphia. They didn't bring baby clothes or a bag. Car seats weren't a thing when I was born, but they didn't bring anything. They weren't prepared to bring a live baby home. They were prepared to go through with the end of the abortion step. During the labor, the doctors came in and said, we were seeing some funny things. And at the end of the delivery, I came out screaming and was not supposed to be alive. And so my name was not chosen. They didn't know what to do. My dad had already lost his first wife and child, their little baby boy named Bobby, in a car accident. A drunk driver had hit them and killed them. And so my dad wasn't in agreement with the abortion attempts. It was my mother who was interested in the abortion. But when I was born, the doctors apparently had a conversation with my dad as they were trying to calm my mother down. She was apparently very angry that she had paid all this good money for these 3 different abortion attempts and it didn't work. And so I guess I'm kind of like the puppy that gets dragged home by the kids and they go, "Can we keep it? Can we keep it? Can we keep it? Mom, can we please? Can we keep it? Isn't it so cute?" And as they were trying to determine whether to send me off to the NICU or just lay me aside, as they say, which means to set the baby aside to die. That happens quite a lot, actually, unfortunately, to abortion survivors. Apparently, there was a little bird on the window ledge, and it was early in the morning, and it happened to be a robin. And so, with the sun shining in that hospital room in Methodist Hospital in Philadelphia,
Mm.
my mom looked over as my dad was trying to convince her to keep me and said, "Fine, name it Robin Dawn," after the little bird in the early morning sunshine. So that's how I got my name.
That speaks to your life, that, a little bird with life speaks to the moment that they are sitting in also to see something. I think of my son, my 10-year-old, I'll say, "What do you want to pray for?" And he'll look around the room and say, "Thank you, God, for that chair, for that, door, for my room, my keyboard." And that's what I'm thinking about as you were born, your mom looked around and saw that robin and said, "Robin Dawn."
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a beautiful story about your son. What we're thankful for really leads us into the first step of agreeing with God about what that thing is. And as a young child, it was really hard for me to be thankful. When I was very young, I spent most of my life in and out of Children's Hospital of Philadelphia dealing with all of the physical after effects of all of that poison in the womb.
Right.
And so I had grand mal seizures, I had digestive problems, I had skin and hair problems. I had weird reactions to the sun. I'm the only person I know that's ever had a houndstooth pattern sunburn. I've had strange blisters break out, allergies to everything. And so I would learn to be grateful for just kind of, as my dad would say, every day you're not pushing daisies is a good day. And
Mm.
what that meant was that the soldiers that he used to fight with when he was in the Navy years ago would talk about things in those terms. And if you're pushing daisies, it meant you had been buried and you were looking up at the underside of the plants and the flowers. Not that you would be alive to see that, but that was just a phrase that they used. And so I started as I was in my childhood years to kind of frame things in that way, that any little thing I could be grateful for, like your son with that chair, that was a good thing for me. I didn't grow up in a church or a saved home, so I didn't even know that gratitude was something that was a good thing to do from the Lord. I knew it helped me to have peace.
Yeah.
As I got older, some of the symptoms diminished, and I noticed that I was able to start to go out and live life. I was told I would never walk. I was told I would never talk. I had to have some surgeries on parts of my body to help them to work more functionally. I had a ton of testing. I also had a lot of abuse in my home. Some abortion survivors grow up with their bio mom, some are adopted. And with me, even though they decided, okay, you can kind of quote unquote keep the puppy, there was never a place made in the family for me. I was always kind of this burden, this afterthought. And so by the time I was 11, that was very uncomfortable, and the abuse was really coming to a head. And I ended up going from living with my mom, who had divorced my father when I was very young, to moving into living with my dad. They both had their dysfunction, although my dad was a little bit of a hero in my eyes. And I was super grateful for him because I knew everybody always talked about the abortion attempts and my birth, and that if dad wasn't there pulling for me, I would not have made it.
Mm.
So I always can look back and see the grace of God in giving me a dad who stood for life for me. He never came to know the Lord before he passed away, but he was still a type or a picture of Jesus to me in a way because he interceded for my life. When I was in my early 20s, I found myself pregnant for my daughter. After having had several miscarriages, I finally came to the place where I knew she was going to be real. She was going to be born. We had made it past all the danger zone parts of the pregnancy, and the doctors were saying, "You're good to go. You're going to deliver." And they set a date. If I didn't deliver by a certain date, they would induce. I finally ended up really thinking about my mom. So it had been over 10 years since I had seen or heard from my mom. We always knew where each other lived, but we had no contact. I didn't agree with her lifestyle. She was self medicating with some alcohol. She had some mental illnesses. And so I really wanted to stay away from that. I didn't really feel like she had any place in her life for me. And I was trying to figure out all the things that a young adult tries to figure out on their own. And I finally had this really overwhelming feeling in all of the pregnancy hormones and everything that a young mom goes through that, this baby's going to need grandparents. And I would really like our family to be connected. So I picked up the phone and I dialed my mom's number for the first time in over 10 years. And I explained to her that she was about to be a grandmother. And I told her my daughter to be his name. And I just simply told her, I don't understand why you made the choices that you made. I don't know what you were thinking. It doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever it is, I forgive you. And that was before I even had a relationship with the Lord. And my gosh, the whole atmosphere changed. I was in Rochester, New York. She was in southern New Jersey. There were several hundred miles between the two of us. We were on a long distance call back when we had landlines and long distance phone bills.
Mm-hmm.
So you wanted to keep it kind of brief. But we both sat in this silence that was pregnant with grace.
Mm.
And nobody knew what to say. I
I
didn't have a
bet.
relationship with the Lord yet, and she never came to know Jesus, as far as I know. Maybe she did in her last moments. Nobody has control of that, right? But the air on both sides, the atmosphere, I guess I should say, was so pregnant with grace. And she just finally kind of gathered herself together and started to ask some questions about how we could connect in person. And I don't remember the details of how all of this worked out, but within a short time after my daughter was born, my mom and her husband packed up their Buick with all a bunch of baby items and drove from southern New Jersey to Rochester, New York. And they came and they met me, met my daughter, met my husband, brought a bunch of baby things, and we never had the close, loving, warm, grandma's going to bake you cookies and always is in the kitchen with an apron on sort of a relationship. We never got the picket fence around the little house or any of those sorts of things. From that time, which is when I was about 21, till this past fall, when I was 46 and my mom passed away, we were able to have phone calls about once a week. We were able to visit with one another in person every 3 to 5 years. My kids knew they had a grandmother who wasn't, she had problems. They would call her Grandma in Carolina. We lived in the Northeast and she lived near Myrtle Beach. And so they would kind of say that, and you could almost see their hand pushing her down, like they're just keeping her there for safekeeping. Grandma's got to stay in Carolina. But they did want to visit her from time to time. They just want to know that they were okay with her and she was okay with them. And she made sure that she bought a house that was big enough that we had bedrooms for everybody when we would come and visit. And it was tenuous when we met together, but we definitely had grace for each other. We understood we had very different value systems. But one of the last things that happened before my mom died is she loved to go on cruises. We both have this travel bug. She loved to cruise, and I like to travel by RV. I fly too, but my favorite is by RV. But she would go on cruises for over 80 days at a time.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine setting up a life that allows that 2 to 3 times a year. Kind of crazy, right? I went to visit her after she came back from one of her big long cruises. And one of the places she visited was the Mediterranean. And she handed me this little bottle and she says, "Here, this is for you." And I asked her what it was. And it was this little bottle of holy water from what they believe to be Mary's house in
Mhm.
Jerusalem. She said she went on this tour, and as a Christian, I know that some of the places in Israel, the tourist people have changed one location to another, and we don't know exactly for sure in some of the tourist areas. Some of the places in the Bible we would love to say, oh, this is that. We're not 100% sure, but in her heart, she went to a place that was important to me, and she got me something as a love gift and
Mm.
brought it back. And she says, "I know this is important to you and Jesus. So here you go, kid."
Mm.
Kid was over 40 years old, and that felt a little strange. But just the fact that she tried, not that we ever meshed our value system, but I feel like grace doesn't always have to change people totally. Grace makes space for people to be authentically who they are.
Yeah. Oh, it sure does. And, you know, hearing your whole story, Robin, how old were you when you found out that about the abortion attempts? How old were you when you found that out?
I was 9 years old.
9 years old. Wow. You knew at 9 years old. And I'm sure then you didn't understand what it meant to have survived an abortion. But as an adult, you knew your whole life as you grew up and began to form your identity, you had that piece of your story. And I think of as you went on to have children of your own, that grace is so evident in your life at the fact that the birth of your daughter, you picked up the phone to bridge a 10-year gap in your relationship with your mom. There is so much grace in that, friend. Many of the survivors that we know were raised by their biological parents, as you were. Many were placed for adoption and raised by wonderful families. You were raised by your biological mom in abuse and then by your dad. How did you get to that place of grace? What did your processing look like, Robin?
That initial phone call when my daughter was being born was something where I can honestly tell you, Denisha, God sovereignly stepped in.
Mm.
I had no processing prior to that. I really had no counseling that helped me to get to that place. I had no support system that encouraged that. I just felt like it was what I was supposed to do, and I did it. I didn't have a relationship with the Lord yet. I wasn't going to church. And I can just honestly say, looking back, the Lord moved on my heart and I was obedient, and I didn't even know that's what was happening.
Isn't that beautiful? They can do that when we don't even know. That was a very bold step for you at that time to take.
Yeah. As I got older and I became more, I guess I would say, a part of the process, you know, um, I have a wonderful relationship with the Lord now. And a lot of my process has just been relational with Him, just talking to Him and listening and then being obedient, trust and obey. There's no better way. So as I've grown, the Lord's really, really taken me back to that passage in Matthew 18, verses 21 through 35, and taught me about forgiveness. And forgiveness and grace really dovetail together. In John 20, verses 22 and 23, Jesus walked through a wall in his resurrected self and came and imparted the Holy Spirit. And the very first thing he tells us to do is to forgive, and that he's got our back with that he's in total agreement with that. And so I felt like if it was that important to the Lord, it really always sat heavily on my heart to forgive. And I feel like forgiveness is such a huge key in that grace process, because if you can't forgive, the word grace really is best translated the supernatural empowerment to bring God's kingdom solution to be here in the natural.
Mhm.
Grace in the Hebrew is the fifth letter of the alphabet, and the word picture in the Hebrew is of the window where we literally pull the supernatural into being in the natural.
Mm.
And that word that goes with it, as far as the alphabet, is hey. So, hey, let's bring it to be in the natural. And so, as we look at how God's working everything out, we kind of have to make space for the fact that He doesn't always give us all the details here in the natural. Sometimes we have to pull things in through that window that we don't even see exist yet. Sometimes there are solutions that we don't even know are there. And I feel like my relationship with my family has always included that. And again, it's not because I am some wonderful hyper spiritual person. It's just that God's somehow sovereignly walked that out through me, even when I didn't even know what I was doing. And I love that I don't always have to know what I'm doing because He does.
There's a grace in that as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And did your mom go on to have, did she have any more children?
No, I was it.
Okay.
No more children. I think she had another abortion. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember when I was, maybe 8 or 9, my my mom went to the hospital and ended up coming home and being in bed, and she just seemed like something was really bad wrong. Like I was not allowed to be around her or near her. There was a lot of crying, and my mom wasn't a feeler. She was a real tough cookie, and that was part of her mental illness. She wasn't one to do a lot of that stuff. And my stepdad kind of puppy guarded the room. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere near her. I remember asking her about that years later, and I had had a number of miscarriages. And so, in my soft heart of empathy, I went to her and I said, "Gosh, Mom, I'm so sorry. Do I remember this event correctly? Did you have a miscarriage?" Because as I looked at it through the lens of my miscarriages, that's what it looked like it might have been. And she just kind of said, "Oh, no, nope, that wasn't a miscarriage," and changed the subject right away. And I knew that there had been an OBGYN involved. And so I'm not sure what all happened there, but I speculate. I think there was possibly another abortion. She made it very clear that I was tolerated, not celebrated.
And the medical issues that you had from birth and the times that you spent in the hospital as a child, do you still have any of the aftermath from that? Are there medical things that you still encounter because of that procedure?
Oh, yeah. Thankfully, I had my last seizure in 1987.
Oh, nice.
That is a huge
That's
relief.
huge. Yeah.
Huge relief. Although I have quite a heart for people who have epilepsy. I have had friends who've had children who have epilepsy. I've raised money for the Epilepsy Foundation. I really have a heart for that because I know what it's like to be in that skin. I have a ton of skin and hair things that happen from time to time. I have places on my scalp that look like little Klingon spots. If you ever watch Star Trek and you see
Mhm.
the Klingons have these strange markings around the edges of their face. I have some in my hairline, just underneath the nape of my neck, and some at the crown. And no hair grows there. And the dermatologists have said that those are burn marks from the saline,
Mm.
apparently from being in it for so long. I had some burning from the saline in my digestive tract, which has caused, there's always a section of my digestive tract that doesn't work, is the best way I know how to describe it without getting into a lot of medical terminology. The way the body works, we're always constantly renewing ourselves, but there are parts that are damaged. And so, the interesting thing with the digestive tract with me is that this part has moved. And so sometimes I have problems in my throat, sometimes I have problems towards my stomach, sometimes it's my small intestine, sometimes it's my large intestine. It's like bingo, you never know. So it just moves around, and it's caused me to have problems that necessitate hospitalizations and diet problems and diet changes, I guess I should say. Some years I'm gluten-free. Some years I'm on something called the low FODMAP diet, which is particularly non-fun. If you want a course in misery, take the low FODMAP diet. In some years I can eat just about anything as long as it's in moderation. If I get zealous and say, oh, I really love, for example, my favorite ice cream, salted caramel. If I love salted caramel ice cream, man, I'm going to have seconds. Oh no, that will cause problems. And all food is like that for me. So that's been a major issue with the digestive things. And then just the after effects of the trauma.
Right.
Have been very interesting to feel the effects in my body. And as I've grown older, to know, oh, that's what that is.
Especially, I would assume, as medical technology and things can kind of pinpoint that more than, oh, you have an issue with your skin, or they can actually narrow that back to your birth.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my skin was beet red and full of bumps.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read medical literature, saline infusion abortion survivors are called the candy apple red babies because our skin was all burned. With me having the 3 different attempts and soaking in that for so long, I had a very long bout with that. And that went on, gosh, my skin's still, it's so thin. And I'll go to a dermatologist once in a while. I've had skin cancer removed and different things like that. And they're always amazed. Your skin is so thin. Your skin doesn't have all the same stuff that everybody's has. Your hair doesn't have all the same stuff that everybody's has. It's very thin and very fragile, both the skin and hair.
How do doctors react when you share your story with them, when you share the why behind it? How have you had doctors react to that?
That's an interesting question, Denisha. I actually had one doctor that told me he was going to take that off of my medical record because he doesn't believe that it's accurate and he doesn't believe that it's possible for someone to survive an abortion attempt. So it does say on my medical record that I'm an abortion survivor, and he wanted to remove that. It made him uncomfortable. And I always wondered, how were you touched by that there, Doc? Were you involved in an abortion somehow? We know that statistically 1 in 3 people are touched by abortion. I tend to think that that number is higher.
Yeah.
And I wondered if he was triggered in his heart.
Yeah. I know that through talking to other survivors as well, the medical piece has been a big deal where either people have said, yes, that's the case, or, well, how did you survive that? Or, if I was the doctor, I would have just done this. And that's so hard to hear as a survivor. I feel like that takes an extra level of grace. I realize that some of our listeners may not necessarily relate to being an abortion survivor, right? That feels like it's really rare. Yet I will tell you guys, it's more common than we know. And that's why we're doing this little mini series. But for each of us listening, if we take our stories and we put them in a pot, and all of our experiences, circumstances that we've been in life that have been hard from our past, if we all put them in a pot and we turn up the heat, and we boil off the unique circumstances, what we have left in the pot is our feelings, or what we're left with, the remnant of those circumstances from things that have happened in our lives. And Robin, I can really hear a ton of God's grace and compassion in your story. So what would you say to a woman listening who has experienced abuse or harm that exists in her story at the hand of someone else, or even ourselves, right? How do we extend the type of grace and compassion that we hear in your story to ours? What thoughts come to mind for you that you can share with us?
What thoughts come to mind when I think of that are the words of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I really feel that encapsulates how to walk that out, because there are some things you can't change, some things you can. You do need the wisdom. It takes a ton of courage, and for the Lord to give you the peace to have the grace when you're able.
And that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very good point. And when you're able is such an important piece there too. Sometimes we can try to step into things before we're ready. And it sounded like the birth of your daughter was the moment you were ready at that point. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful picture.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Robin, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it's, as we hear your story, there's such a theme of grace, such a thread of God's grace on your life to spare your life, to, help you through the medical issues over the years, to build that, to form that relationship with you, and then to bring you back into a relationship with your mom. That's just a beautiful picture of God's grace. So thank you so much for sharing that today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Denisha. I love coming on your podcast.
Thanks for listening. I pray you found hope in today's conversation and maybe even feel a little less alone in your story. Stay connected with us on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaimed Story. Want to learn more about living a reclaimed life and how you can be a part of our growing community of reclaimers? Check out our website at reclaimedstory.com. All of those links and more will be in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this inspirational podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. That is a huge help in helping us reach more people to live the reclaimed life. Thank you so much for listening.